Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's show. How are you? Welcome on, welcome all. Delighted you could join me as we get started with this thing of ours, the Grand Torino. Please, as we always do, don't forget, press the like button, press the subscription and the blue bell, and you'll be reminded of future broadcasts here on the Grand Torino. Also, please consider becoming a member today. Melted Celt just joined as a new fan member. Thank you very much. Irishman 5x5 gives us a good sound check as 16 join us now. I presume people are still listening into the government's medical broadcast now over on the Virgin Media System on the Facebook page or on the Oireachtas TV, where our, how shall I say, I'm cautious in tonight's approach for tonight's show, because the gravity of the situation is not lost to me, and I would well believe is not lost on all of you. And for those of you and the number of you that have been isolating indoors, not even on suspicion of having the COVID-19, but have been staying indoors as a good manner of skills, just to keep carrying forward and stay isolated and restrict travel as much as possible. Goes without saying, hand ablutions go without necessary. Social distancing seems to be taken apart. There are many complications. There are many different ways that we should look at this and come to a conclusion on this. But we're going to ease in gently tonight because, first of all, I want to do this myself, not only just for you, but I think we should all, at this moment in time, take a deep breath and relax. A couple of articles to go through with you today, and I may be pressing a few buttons when I go through with them, but I'm reminded and I'm cautious. I will make a little statement towards the end because I want some of tonight's show to be cut and edited and re-uploaded by certain other YouTube channel stations, whatever they deem necessary to take out. But I will make a short speech towards the end, or a note for us to finish on. We will also conclude with our usual reading of Padraig Pearse's collective works, just to round off, focusing mainly on the education system in Ireland. A little bit of a side, or maybe just more of a welcome distraction, as we face what we can all predictably see should be and should have been quite some time ago a lockdown or a severe restriction in movement. I know some of the questions from some of the media there, just questioning the doctors from the health board there, and even with our limited number of deaths, 9, I think the 9 is the number of total deaths here in Ireland so far today. One with a confirmed underlying condition, and the second, the statistics were not available. Of the current 9 deaths that are recorded, none of the statistical information about whether they have underlying conditions or not was released by the department spokesperson there. They are unable to give us that collation of information, but when they do indeed get them, they will release them. So with us here having this place now where we can talk, it is incumbent upon us to remain calm. Not necessarily, now is not the time for finger pointing, finger pointing and the blaming. The sense of panic should not really permeate. We should take stock of the situation. We should understand what our government at this mid-time is instructing us to do, and I encourage everybody. M. Menton lets us know 23 deaths now, GT, thank you. We had 10 yesterday alone. Now is not the time for despair, as you say. We will not have despair on this channel. We will just have these rational conversations where I will bring up these certain news articles because I want to talk about the other elephant in the room, which was our bailout, which I am none too happy with. And I don't believe I believe a number of you would also not be quite happy with that. It's an old corporate tactic. And out of this crisis, our would-be benefactors are indeed preying on us by offering us this money, this set of money. I remind you that the Italians have now brought the French, Hungarian, Polish governments have now rounded out and attacked the EU Brussels Parliament for not supporting and aiding in Italy in this desperate time of need with a financial solution to the coronavirus situation that we are all facing. Timmy Robinson joins us from the UK. Thank you very much for joining us. Quick shout out to all the live chat members before we crack on. Robbie Jenkins, Tom Foran, Susie Kilter, Kate McKay, Vaughan Malone, Jay Finn, Gerald Foley, Bobby McPhillips, Doug Tuis, No One's Flower, Colette Boland, Tammy Marie Purdy. Welcome one, welcome on. Hop on board, sit down. I hope you have a nice hot cup of lemon. I'm drinking hot lemon every 20 minutes to wash out my mouth and potentially destroy any bacteria or viruses that are in your mouth and setting on your throat. And the acidity of the lemon also. Just my personal thing, not a recommendation or medical recommendations for anyone. I have a few pictures and a few articles to go through, so we will indeed jump into tonight's first article, and I will keep this broadcast short because I want to touch on who I will be proportioning the growing numbers of murders that will happen in Ireland going forward. These will not be deaths; these are preventable deaths. This is murder by design, in my opinion. And those open border fanatics, those open border pushers, those multicultural pushers that should have enacted a lockdown or a travel ban from Hong Kong or from China. It is now apparent the flagrant disregard for this nation, where they propped up globalist policies and kept our borders open and kept our airport and ports wide open for months at a time. Other nations reacted quickly, shut down their transport or their routes figures to all affected areas. We have stuck with this EU apparatchik that is now very much cast a great shadow over this country. And I will try and stop shaking my hands and repeating. Yeah, nobody. I wanted to talk on Dan O'Brien last night, encouraging pensioners to help the economy. It's all about the fucking economy with these people. Spend. Asking our OAPs, our pensioners, to spend to help drive the economy is like throwing water on a deck of a boat when there's in the middle of a fucking storm. That is their answer. Not one mention of debt forgiveness or what we spoke about on the previous episode when we mentioned a debt jubilee as first advocated by Vox Day, which I read out to you. No mention of debt forgiveness. This 150 billion usury debt or this usury bailout that China has offered us will not last us 3 years, even at current expenditure. Even if we restricted it to healthcare and welfare, it won't last pissing time. But at what interest and what contractual agreements would we have signed out to? Why hasn't Brussels been able to supply us with emergency coronavirus funds? Where is the solidarity that needs to be shown now that was so lauded over 20, 30 years while we facilitated the silent infiltration of our country? And I call it, as I've said it in the title there, infiltration, not invasion. This has been a slow infiltration. But Corona or COVID, but this situation has exposed all its weaknesses for all to see. And we must now concentrate on focusing on our determination to defeat this virus by carrying out the necessary protocols that have worked. Social distancing, obviously washing the hands, but there are alternatives, as we have previously mentioned. But the reason I spoke on China, with news from across the world, with Chinese actions, I bring to your attention this first article, which I want to share with you, as the many messages come into the Grand Arena as we are now live. And like I say, we're going to make it areas as we can. We'll jump in first of all. Let's get rid of you. We'll read that out towards the end. You'll enjoy that. Not a lot, but you'll enjoy it. Always things jump when we go to the screen save. I see more and more people are using the Zoom app. If you're not familiar with the Zoom app, It is a great way for mass communication. If you're from mass communication, you can hold up to about 8 to 12 to 14 individuals in group conversations. It's a free to use web platform. You only have to go online to using your whatever web browser. Works really well with Chrome. But, you know, for you newbies, that's the best one to go with so far. Have your conversations and keep connected with your nearest and dearest through the Zoom. It's quite a reliable platform. It's easy enough to sign up and it's free to use. It's a business platform. You can share information through there, and I think that's going to be the way forward. Appreciate that, Stephen O'Kane. Thank you very much. So get on board the Zoom and join up and have many conversations also your Google Hangout. I know many other people now will be doing their broadcast. 196, thank you so very much for joining me. I focused my attention here on this first article from news.com.au, Australia. Hand sanitizers, mask rage. Chinese firm shipped out Australian medical supplies. Chinese government-backed property giant has secretly raided in bulk Australian supplies of masks, hand sanitizers, antibacterial wipes, and essential medical supplies and shipped them back to China. The Greenland Group, which manages the high-end real estate projects in Sydney, Melbourne, proactively drained Australian supplies of anti-coronavirus equipment. The Sydney Morning Herald reported 3 million surgical masks, 500,000 pairs of gloves, and bulk supplies of sanitizers and wipes were bought up in Australia and other countries where Greenland operates. While the bulk purchases and shipping were perfectly legitimate, the goods shipped to the bulk in China include the very item that has been in short supply for Australian citizens as well as health professionals. They were accumulated in Greenland's Sydney headquarters and sent to China over weeks in January and February. As coronavirus locked down Wuhan, the global Fortune 500 company put its normal work on hold and instructed staff in Australia, Canada, Turkey, and elsewhere to source supplies. Pallet loads of items, including thermometers and 700,000 hazmat suits, were sent to China, the Herald reported. Greenland employer and its HR staff members, contract managers, and other away from the desk to go out and amass as many of these items as possible. Not very reassuring behavior from our would-be benefactors that are here now supplying, I believe, in Galway, in the Connacht Tribune. We'll touch on that episode, and you'll see where my train of thought leads us to as we go through these separate articles and how I reveal to you, or how I try to point your attention to China's hand in all of this. And I know in the live chat we could track it back even as far as the Stanford University or back in the university colleges where it was first originated. And it was, what was the terminology? The gain of function that elevated it from H1N strain or SARS or MERS, the gain of function which was created in an American university, and then the patents and contracts were then sold over to a laboratory, a third stage laboratory, I think they were called. Only certain laboratories are capable of performing and indeed can buy or use these viruses at any one stage. So the shipment or the patent or the extra virus that was created, COVID-19, with its extra gain of function, if you search that protocol, it should bring you up to a university professor that outlines the capability of the level 3 laboratory in the Chinese province where this seems to have originated from, along with articles that were included, and you could see in the many Q broadcasts or truth knowledge class channels that are broadcasting and explaining to you where the originations and how this was preceded and how this has come about by design. But in that 2007 article, it showed that the combination of this virus, bacteria or germ, in conjunction with the exotic eating habits of the local populace in that region, was described as a time bomb waiting to happen. All points and leads us all to question gain of function. Thank you very much, Susan Schaefer. When they come to that level of treachery, yes. So that also reels me on into quite some fascinating things. Many of my close circle of friends, or many people that close to me, have reached out and have spoken about different YouTube or different bits of information that they seem to be coming in contact with, shall we say, with, because of today's phraseology and what's happening. You're coming in contact with previously unknown forms of knowledge, sources of the knowledge, may well come from friends and family sharing information or sharing news details, as more and more of what we described and what have always described as an awakening process. The Gran Torino here has always seen itself as just a repeat station, in essence, to broadcast and highlight the global message that is being sent out since this infiltration was uncovered, and this secret war that we are currently facing in a global, not only against a global pandemic virus-like situation, but the serious operations that are currently active going on around by various different governments, primarily the United States. I draw your attention to the comment that the President Trump announced in one of his last briefings in the coronavirus, where a young lady was rescued from Peru through the actions of military, through the Delta Force teams under the direction of General, live chat, what was that general's name, just so I don't get it wrong? I think it was an Irish second name. Anyway, we allude you to the fact that the secret war and the secret operations that are going on around the world, we elevate our position not only for Ireland, but we come back down with another story here of more, and I would say, malfeasance. Our would-be saviors are not on their best behavior to other nations around the world. This article from, I'm after forgetting your name, lad. Zero Hedge. How could I forget Zero Hedge? This article from Zero Hedge: China just sent 150,000 test kits to Prague, and 80% of them didn't work. As the real state of affairs in China, now months into its coronavirus outbreak, remains unknown, the country is trying to at least give the impression that things are fine and that it is genuinely interested in helping out the rest of the world. China has claimed to have made donations of ventilators and testing kits to countries like Iran and Italy over the last week, seemingly trying to now play a good cop with the neighboring countries it is likely to fault for infecting. Meanwhile, we have been pointing out for obvious inconsistencies with the information coming out of Beijing, as it has been happening. And in terms of faking the notion of helping the rest of the world, China can't even do that right. Czech newspaper Iroz, I believe, reported that China sent 150,000 testing kits to Prague, which have returned false results up to 80% of the time. In other words, they simply don't work. PJ Media provided a translation to the article. We checked them on Sunday at the University Hospital Ostravia, but unfortunately the error rate was quite high, so now we are waiting for the results of further testing across the country. They have never been tested positively because it works with antibiotics. We tested those who searched for a sampling site. Fortunately, we were so far-sighted that samples were immediately taken for the classic examination, and that just proved the error rate of the tests. Meanwhile, the reality on the ground in China paints a far different picture than both the attitude of Beijing and the daily coronavirus numbers suggest. For example, the first time since the virus outbreak began, China's National Health Commission claimed on March 19th that there were no new infections in the entire country. But Chinese citizens described a different reality. Never miss the news that matters most. Receive a daily recap featuring a created list of must-read stories. That was just an ad, my apologies. In Wuhan, the ground zero of the epidemic, and that's now commonly agreed, hence the ascribing of it as the Chinese flu. It is a Chinese flu because, as reported, it's in this province. In a video posted to social media March 19th, a Chinese citizen shows the Wuhan Union Hospital, one of 46 designated facilities to treat COVID-19. And the queue in front of it, look, people are lining up in front of the fever clinic at Wuhan Union Hospital, the person says. The Epoch Times confirmed that footage was filmed at the hospital. Also on March 19, a construction worker shared a video of a new makeshift hospital set up within a stadium in suburban Wuhan. After another night, our mission is almost complete, the man said. A new makeshift hospital will be in operation soon. All leading us up towards the fact of how even here now, during presser briefs here in Ireland, our government ministers continue their onslaught of criticising President Trump and his inaction and his rhetoric coming out from the United States, when he at least closed any transport or any travel between the United States and China in January and acted decisively and swiftly, and has been reported by many institutions in the United States as having far reduced the threat of the coronavirus, of the COVID-19 human malware virus that has threatened the United States. That was the definitive action that will save a great number of lives in the United States. Again, I'll point you over and I'll bring these up now while we're off screen. I want to remind you of these interviews that were played out. I want to remind you over and over again of these words spoken by who I will hold as accountable for the many murders that will happen in this country because of these, not only their ineptitude, but their nepotism and their failure of leadership. Don't forget, this man is now the head leader of our health minister here in Ireland. This is the man who categorically cost the lives through cancer smear tests. This man's ineptitude can only be quantified by the results after we come out, once we have reached the negative plane or the dip in transmission rates of this crisis.
Movement of people is very much at the core of the entire purpose of that movement. Even if people were in the space of individual countries banning flights, it simply wouldn't work. I mean, people move from one country to the other country to the other country, so Europe needs to act together on decisions, and Ireland will always act in unison with the European Commission and with the World Health Organization in relation to all of these issues, and our responses have to be proportionate. So we can't avoid people travelling around, people moving around, but we can look at specific high-risk events.
We can't avoid.
But it will be able to organise you to decide to respond.
For those of you that missed at the start, I think it's well worth 33 seconds, funnily enough. Listen to this again.
Where free movement of people is very much at the core of the entire purpose of that movement. Even if people were in the space of individual countries banning flights, it simply wouldn't work. I mean, people move from one country to the other country to the other country, so Europe needs to act together on decisions, and Ireland will always act in unison with the European Commission and with the World Health Organization in relation to all of these issues, and our responses have to be proportionate. So we can't avoid people travelling around, people moving around, but we can look at specific high-risk events and give recommendations, but it will be able to organise you to decide to respond.
So you hear the words there from himself. We cannot avoid the movement of people. He'll put international obligations. I remind you, every political party in Ireland stands over their international obligations. They put people from other countries ahead of our nation, of our peoples. You know me. I try my best to be level-headed. I will bring up the second one, and I did have a third video lined up, but I'll bring up this second piece here, if you will, because another one that is culpable, another article. I did have a few, but I'll just share this one with you again and remind you of their government ministers and their words. Here now, lest we should forget.
But what about the people who may be planning to travel here for the parades? The parades aren't happening, but the people still travel here anyway.
I think that's a matter for them. I mean, Ireland is an open, it's a welcoming country. It's a country that places great value on tourism as part of our economy and part of our country.
So no move to restrict flights at this point in time?
No, there's no such move in place. One of the reasons we have to be aware of is mobility, the ability to go in and out of countries is still a vital part of how economies function in a very basic way. But of course, we have to protect the rights for Irish people to be able to continue to come to Ireland. But as with all of these matters, we'll keep it under review. Airlines, the Department of Foreign Affairs are making particular decisions in relation to particular locations within countries. Some of those decisions have already been made, but we will keep this under review as we work our way through the challenges of coronavirus.
Okay.
I don't know how long we've been advocating for the complete shutdown of airports, but all throughout last week, flights from Iran, flights from Spain, flights indeed from Italy and the UK, coming and going backwards and forward at our airport. And our very airport had no screening, no testing, just a stand. I traveled through myself, I came through the airport myself, and it was just leaflets and information direction, no testing, no quarantining, no testing on the immediate site. We'll see though that some asylum seekers are now being returned at point of entry at Dublin Airport because the Gardaí won't risk infecting. We now know 27 of our Gardaí are self-isolating, having come in contact with infected victims or asylum seekers presenting at the airport, and thereby making some of our police stations even redundant. I think are still under lockdown and quarantine. I'm trying to get through this information and share these articles with you, but we should not take our eye off the ball at this time as well. Our would-be helpers are also our would-be usurpers. I mentioned these borrowing tactics from the likes of China also make significant roads that they are taking out from the countries that they already primarily own, i.e. Australia. They own pretty much all of Australian mineral rights and a couple of ports. Exactly what happens in Zambia, in South Africa, and in Africa, and other African nations, when they need bailouts and when they need monies, and when they can't meet the bailouts or the terms and conditions of those bailouts or meet their repayment schedules, then they have to sell national assets, then they have to sell state assets. And I believe a long-term strategy of the Chinese government would be to include the purchase of one of our ports, be it Cork or Dublin, as a strategic foothold in this region, coming along lines of their expansion of the Silk Road 2.0. That is what the Silk Road 2.0 is all about. This is part of the problem, as well as the openness and the spreading of this disease was facilitated by globalisms and the free movement of people. We spoke here on this channel, as we do in this live chat there, time and time again, of the weapon that is the free movement of labor. It just drives down money. Economically, we always spoke about this. Even though our great detractors, all those the great detractors that attack me, attack other YouTubers and other political voices that have spoken out since last year and spoken about the need for border control. Border control saves lives. Two of our ministers there just speaking hand in glove from their European overlords, saying that they would not shut or restrict the movement and access of peoples to and from Ireland. This article struck me then again, or struck me and came to my attention from the Connacht Tribune, and I want to place this into the zeitgeist and into your memory banks too as well, that we also have a factory here that does produce ventilators, and they're currently ramping up their production of ventilators. Their staff currently in and around 250, but they say they're going to include it and increase it by a further 250. I don't know where these people are going again. Is this 250 more people? Have they been screened? Have they been isolated? You know, this is this free movement. Is this just another way? But the manufacturing of these respirators, let's get through the article quickly. Parkmore-based Medtronic significantly ramps up ventilator production in response to COVID-19. Galway Bay FM newsroom, Parkmore-based medtech firm Medtronic has significantly ramped up the production of ventilators in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Additional staff are being transferred to the Galway facility from other Medtronic sites across Ireland in order to support 24/7 manufacturing. There are currently 250 employees dedicated to ventilator manufacturing, and the multinational plans to double that number in the very near future. Medtronic says no single company can meet the current demand for ventilators, but it is prioritizing high risk and high need areas for allocation on a weekly basis for global distribution. I remind you of Germany's actions in last week's broadcast, where they refused to give over medical supplies to Holland. I remind you of France's refusal to hand over more medical equipment to the United Kingdom that had already previously been purchased, and they refused to hand them over, keeping them for themselves. I believe these ventilators should be sectioned off for our use only. This is a national interest. That should now be made to produce ventilators at a peak capacity, because we are severely short of ICU units in the Republic of Ireland. That will become more and more apparent, as they say, but I will not speak in these matters. I spoke to you last week that Ireland has 9 beds per 1,000 of our population in Ireland, and even less so of now sorely needed and much needed ICU units, intensive care units, primarily for breathing. So I want to, I'll jump off there. I will jump off there. Light chat, how are you? Well, I'm very much engaged in my process here. How are you tonight, this evening? Are we in good form? How are we? Do we think our government is doing a good job? And I say our government, there is no elected government. Do we have the Brussels operators? Are they being effective? 1 or 2? 1 for yes, 2 for no. Little interaction with yourselves, live chat. A doctor in the surgery said to my sister that most of the beds are filled with non-nationals as they have a higher tendency to be overcrowded. Indeed, a very fair statement. I believe the direct provision centre will be an absolutely shitfest that will become even more apparent. It's like I said to you, the screaming ninnies are trying to ask us to remove vulnerable people from direct provision centres. I believe that's already been happening. We already spoke Carlos Devine. I know another, somebody else got into me, a lot of twos kicking in. Alice Clark, Martel, 27, a bit wishy-washy. Lots of twos, yeah, I agree. It is not so much, in essence, a very binary question, or a binary answer, I should say. It was a binary question. But indeed, just to put it out there as well, where was I going there? Source said the DP centres. Again, not only calling for the lockdown of the airports, there should be restrictions on DP centres. They should be quarantined now. There should be no free movement from direct provision centres because of the high increase in transmission of the coronavirus, COVID-19, or human malware. We need to take these effective measures now, urgently. And I encourage and insist that the national lockdown should be taken in place for a 2-week period, for a period of a minimum 2 weeks, 3 weeks for the inoculation, for the incubation period. It's not for me. I'm just saying this is my personal opinion. Lots of twos. Thank you very much for the support. And there, tea cakes. Yes, please don't forget to smash the like button. It all goes and helps with the algorithms. Please do leave a comment in the show, in the section afterwards. Again, it helps to promote us on the algorithms pushing it out. A couple of bit of a Twitter commentary or commentary from our left. We got a few articles from the Examiner with Mick Clifford lauding that the benefits of socialism now taking place, now that the blue shirt or the supposed conservative light government is now taking over private hospitals and spreading the impending burden over numerous hospitals, and that if we'd all just stuck with socialism, this all would have worked out so much for the better. But as Jeb McGurk speaks in Grip Media, he also points out, and never forget that the socialists will always use a good crisis to laud the effects or the uses of a communist diktat, but it only ever works in a crisis situation. But at this stage, we should also remind those that laud this action that it comes at a price, that this is not for free, and all of those cannot be helped. This is long-term, more usury, more death on our youth, on our potential future generations. But I remember I seen Charlie. I thought this was a good thread to put in, and I hope the good patriot Richie Hayes will not. Look. I got blocked. Did I get blocked? Bear with me, and let me try and reload that. It's a good Twitter thread after our inglorious Minister for Justice tweeted out this statement, and I believe Richie Hayes brought it up. This is just a Twitter handle. I'm sure it's public enough that Richie won't mind me reading this out. I was tagged in it eventually, so I thought it's important to give it a bit of criticism or context, I should say. Charlie Flanagan tweeted out, at this critical time for our country, we are fortunate to have people born elsewhere doing vital work in hospitals, care homes, supermarkets, as Gardaí, etc. This is time to recognize the value of our diversity. Racist incidents are not acceptable and should be reported to Gardaí. Did you hear what this man is saying? Richie Hayes jumps in, effectively criticizing typical disgusting political tactics. Never waste a good crisis. Let it have a good crisis go to waste. A blind man can see what's going on here. This orchestrated attack on national and cultural sovereignty by government, NGOs and activists and their puppet masters must be called out wherever we find it. And then we have, before it's not too late, jumped in, well, what about the 2 Donegal men convicted of rape and the many other murderers and rapists Charlie misadventures have caused? Charlie will never mention them or their victims. Quite correct. Richard replies, absolutely inexcusable, but evidence to those of us with eyes that the media and the ruling classes are engaged in orchestrated attack on our Indigenous society. Why else are their messages so aligned? The media are supposed to be unbiased and impartial. They are anything but. Before it's too late, replied, I haven't seen the news tonight, but has one single media outlet asked the government why yesterday they said they were following the South Korean approach, test, 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 and today have cut back on that? I mean, come on. I believe we should look at the Singapore model. The Singapore model. We might touch on that in tomorrow's broadcast. I'll get some more information on it. I think it was a more effective protocol, shall we say. Richard replied, they are grasping at straws, understandably, considering but that being the case, why do the media give such a hard time to nations whose chief medical officers have given different advice to be approved? Given the lack of data, each approach has the same statistical chance of success. Totally agree, Richie. That's why the chemical compound, which is listed on 2 or 3 videos, I believe is important for you to understand. And I'll quantify that because someone was asking Twitter to take down my Twitter handle again. Although I am heavily shadow banned and censored on that platform, we still make a point to read through it here so that you may see it. And I'll show you that accusation of me giving out medical advice, which was far from the case. Richard replies, and why would the medical director criticism towards President Trump and Prime Minister Johnson but turn a blind eye to President Xi Jinping, the architect of this catastrophe, who arrested his own medical staff for alerting the outside world? Somebody else then jumped in and said, Trump and Johnson are responsible for their responses. Calling it a hoax or going for the herd immunity was their choices, nobody else. Herd immunity, completely bad idea. We completely understand. Richie Hayes finishes off, yet was Xi Jinping that remains untouchable and never criticized by our media over here. But they're taking money because they're taking money off the graph, because Europe will not give us any money in a bailout. They only have a 500 billion bailout fund that they set up since 2008, since the last crash. And I'll remind you that Britain has set up its own 300 billion coronavirus reaction plan. So Brussels only has 500 billion for 27 member states, or 26 as it stands, whatever the number near now. This is going to shatter and fracture the EU bloc. This will shatter this bloc. But that's neither here nor there. That is not what we worry about. I am making and asking you to remain vigilant and seek that information that is being passed on to you and discern at your own discretion. We'll jump away from that Twitter land, and I'll bring you to the accusation then as well of me giving out medical advice. Oh yeah, completely zoomed in. Bear with. I do apologize. Bear with. I want to get through this. We'll make it as short as we can, and we will get through to the stories as they appear. And it will be under my profile or tweets. Yes. Can we reduce? Yes. Come on. The old laptop's having to work 10 to the dozen. I have. Where are you? Earlier on today, fighters. I think it's worth, just bear with and see if I can dig it out. Also, yes, I would also remind you of the the social distancing by the men and women of Ireland back in 1922. This was social distancing on Grafton Street back in 1922, if you would remember. I dropped that in there for your delectation. Also, this springs to mind. I won't make comment on it, but I do ask you to read through it yourself. I believe this also is something we should not take our eye off as well. You can pause the video yourself after the fact and read through that. And the accusation, and I think it's where I really do want to find that one. I know this is awful of me, but please bear with. I really do want to drag that one up for you. It was in regards to an accusation. Tweet and replies. I should probably bring it up. So, touching in London is going. GT, when are you going to ask Dora Valby out on a date? She likes you. You know, I've been Streaky Bacon. You are awful. That is a lovely accent, but there are many beautiful accents out there, and I'm particularly fond of a Russian accent. I am, but I digress. So here it is here. Fortunately, let me just bring this up for you, live chat, and we will finish off on this one here. So this, I don't know, Sport Rebel Q, whatever, content that increases the chance that someone is contracting. The statement was Twitter safety. Please review the claims by Rowan Croft on treating virus. This encourages the use of ineffective treatment to prevent COVID-19 and the accusation. And he then points out this picture of Twitter's guidelines in relation to that. And he points to this as being evidence, I believe. No, not evidence. But I replied, what did I make the claims? By eating healthy and strengthening your immune system. It's common sense. I did recommend closing the borders and the airport. We imported this virus through free movement. Harris didn't act until the EU told him to act. And I finished out there with some information that comes out from the United States and their response in New York. These protocols have been carried out by Governor Cuomo, and it seems that they are being made out. I also noticed that the Trump administration has asked one of the factories to convert and start producing ventilators at an extraordinary rate, and he's asked them to switch their, I think, vehicle plant to convert to ventilator production and make it fast. We now have no understanding. We have a plant here in Ireland, and that we can be torn and it can be stripped. It can be neat and searched and suited for the nation's purposes, as it should be. And then when we can have enough beds to deal with our own trauma, then we can then assist other nation states and push them out. The whole ethos of nation states cooperating under the European flag seems a mockery now, and it's completely failed. That is why I say the EU bloc is coming under more and more scrutiny, as more and more countries will see the ineffectiveness of it and are promoting separate strategies to remove themselves from it. Okay, like we're coming up on 42 minutes. I think an interesting read might be this one here. I will ask for your opinion on what you think, and maybe a great many of you might have already read through it. But it is a fascinating look, or an article on how the world will look. I'll give you the title here. I'll bring it up for you there now, and we'll touch in with your live chat. You have a look through while I have a look through the live chat and touch in with your good selves. And tell me, is it worth a read through? John Wood says, what's the rules of the lockdown? I should imagine it would be very much mirrored from the United Kingdom, where you will be arrested if you're in breach of the curfew or the restriction of movement. You will be arrested, as is happening in the United Kingdom currently. We are already trying to imitate their hate speech legislation. Don't forget, that was very critical to bring in so that we could not criticize or call the coronavirus the Chinese flu, which it is. It should be made clear and should be said time and time again. It is the Chinese flu, even though China is now trying to secure and push its way to a forward echelon position that would be a major strategic foothold in the global world and global war going forward, should the Silk Road 2.0 be expanded to Ireland. I believe our political class have already snapped their hand off them. We have Steve C says, I'm a factory worker, got a text from my boss saying we were essential work as we were in the supply chain for food and pharma packaging. Nice knowing you. Nice to be so flippant, but make sure you take all your protocols and take care of yourself in there, Stevie C. Nation State says that they won't be able to implement the lockdown in Ireland. I beg to differ. I beg to differ, young sir. Email Caesar Girl says this is where those new cars will be rolled out. This is, I remind you, Gordon Brown from across the water has made a statement there saying that we should commit to introducing a temporary new world order while the crisis, the Chinese flu virus, is at its pending. So you can see what actions they are taking. This crisis should be treated with complete and maximum severity. We should make all our protocols as apparent. It's quite a long read, this one here. I don't know if you want to go through with it, but it's a potential look of how the world might look or how we will react going forward, and some societal changes that might have occurred unbeknownst to ourselves and that may carry on. I believe it's worth a read. Shall we go through, or will we finish up on, shall we leave this over from tonight? Actually, I'll make an executive decision. I think we could leave that for maybe a weekend stream. We'll keep this one short as we are coming up towards the hour program. I will finish off on this statement drafted earlier, and then we'll take a quick roll call and sign off and say good night. And I'll read it rather than bring it up on the screen for you. So live chat, as we read through this, please just take a second, and we'll sign off on a live chat. I read this. You may recall the reenactment staged in American mafia films and some grainy old footage of the early 1960s US congressional hearings. A parade of top-level mafiosi were dragged before Republican and Democratic politicians to answer questions about what was then called La Cosa Nostra, or in Italian, Our Thing, the Five Families. The mob, Robert F. Kennedy, Jack Kennedy's younger brother, was the Attorney General for the Jack's administration, and he pursued the mafia with a vengeance, in part because J. Edgar Hoover, the director of the FBI, refused to do so. As I've said, a procession of grim-faced, cigar-chewing, silk suit-wearing thugs took the spotlight, but point-blank refused to answer Bobby's questions, pleading the fifth. What's the fifth? The fifth is the amendment to the American Constitution that gives an accused adequate warning. To be fair, it's a fundamental building block of a free society. You have the right to remain silent, etc. But our politicians, the three ministers of this zombie government, and administration of the undead and unwanted, deserve no such protection. Their words condemn them. They can't plead the fifth because they are on record, on camera, in quotes from the horse's mouth, putting esoteric notions of borderless world ahead of common sense, putting a utopian ideology of freedom, of movement, ahead of the cold reality that sometimes you must limit the movement for the common good of the people you represent, rather than the hurt feelings of foreigners, putting open borders ahead of the health, safety, welfare, and lives of our Irish brothers and sisters. I might be the Bobby Kennedy of this area, and we know that telling the truth, what happened to him because of the people he offended by telling the truth. Likewise, his big brother, John F. Kennedy. But in real time, the Irish people are going to realize much sooner who bears the responsibility for what transpired in Ireland in the last few weeks. Who was right? Who was wrong? Please God, we can act together as a nation to save lives. Let's leave the reckoning till later. Look after your loved ones, but let's keep the truth close to hand, and God bless. Live chat. We will sign off there tonight. I think that's enough for me. I'm quite cautious of saying anything any further. Please, as we do at this time, where you're from in this great big plane of existence of ours, where you are in the world, your age, and your current disposition, and we will sign off and say goodbye. And don't forget, say a prayer for each and every one of us, and keep your nearest and dearest safe. Keep going forward. Please follow the protocols. Please maintain social distancing, but please, primarily, please stay indoors for the health of yourself and for the health of everybody, for the health of everybody that is nearest and dearest around with you. I remind you that when the mafiosi were dragged out in front of the public, the truth for knowledge of the actual perpetrators of those that have failed this country over successive governments, the day of reckoning shall be ours. But in the meantime, Red Knight joins us is 46 from Meath. Dublin Bread says, stay safe, people. Irish and Torrid, Brisbane, 48. TK, smash the like button, please. Thank you very much. Timbuktu and Old Enough from Mickey 1961. A Armchair Limerick Nationalist. Wash your hands, folks. Ballyfermot 42. Half Dead from Edmonton. God bless and stay safe from Aaron McCarthy. Jacinta Chadwick says Dublin 71. God bless you, Jacinta. Stay safe. Good look after yourself. Peter Stewart, Belfast 54. Terry is Mullingar. Vaughan Malone, good night from the Midwest. Barry E is Donegal, God Save Ireland, very old, angry man, 58. Earthsguard, 81. Tala, 38. Ballymoney, Northern Ireland. Unionist, fantastic channel. Well, thank you, Stephen O'Kane. Liverpool, 62 from the Peace Poppy. Danny London, 54. Tigers Bay, Bootle, 50. Called A Bootle. Spud from Wexford, Peter Murphy. We've also got John Wood, Northern Ireland, 36. Dingle, 60 plus and a bit from Sean Scanlon. Shamrock 1966 is in Blanchardstown, 53, and wishes us all and says God bless to all. Vaughan Malone says good night. Midwest, Dublin 7 from Emer Duggan. Rose James is Robots from the UK. Maureen O'Leary is West Cork 59. Crooks Avenue says true. Lindsay McHale says North Carolina 65. You stay safe out there, Patriot. Colette Boland says God bless your work. Round 21 as always. God bless. Michael X and Mercia from New London. Love my Paddy brothers. Go on, you good thing. John Bell says thanks, bud. Dublin 48. Liam Fleming is in West Cork. What's the story? Go gently on the toilet paper, folks. Well done there. Handed it down. County Down 60. God bless from 1031-770. TKH is now our special. Marto, channel member, is Dublin and 60. Keep her lit. Marto, thanks you very much. Thanks from Dublin's Bread. Kilcullen 54 from What's the Story. Rojans is in Manchester. And we have Eric Brass Sligo from John 95. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we will delve in. White Wolf also in Wolverhampton 53. Look at this, beautiful people from all around the world joining into us from this hour, as we will do and try and maintain going forward. And should the lockdown be produced, we will certainly be streaming from 8 o'clock every night and keep in touch with you and try and bring this together, this gathering of people, this common assault of truth seekers, those that wish to question their epistemologies, these epistemological explorers, as we would speak and say, and speak in the things that mainstream will not touch on, or that are pansy, nepotistic politicians trying to obfuscate their grand collusion. They are now going to try and bring in a new world order. They are now going to try and arrest dissension from off the streets. Stay safe, Patriots. Keep indoors and look after your nearest and dearest. And we'll see you again on tomorrow night on the Grand Torino. God bless. Wuss. I'll give it a second one. Wuss. See you tomorrow, Patriots. Stay safe.